but we will go ahead so that you all will have the opportunity to learn about Juneteenth. And then I will share this on my Facebook page. All right. All right. So at this time, we're going to get started. I want to thank you all for coming today to celebrate Juneteenth. So this book is really going to tell you about what Juneteenth is. And some of us have heard about it before, and some of us have not. Some of us have heard about it a lot more right now with everything that's going on in the world. We've had the opportunity to learn about Juneteenth, but I'm going to share more with you about Juneteenth. And I have had the opportunity to be on a board really to help others understand what Juneteenth is. We've had festivals, we have games for children, we have storytelling. I'm actually a storyteller. And we have a really great time. And I like to call it a big family reunion where we all can get together and talk about Juneteenth. And so I'm going to go ahead and share with you. And this is my book, and it's called Why We Celebrate the Rich Legacy of Juneteenth. Okay. So I wish we could interact together, because usually I get to go to libraries or schools and talk to the children. So if you can interact with me in the comments, that will be great. All right. So it says, why do we celebrate Juneteenth? It seems like a day full of bad memories. So here we see two children. They're talking to their grandmother, and they're asking, what is this Juneteenth? Why are we celebrating it? It says people were slaves. They were not free. Why, oh, why do we celebrate Juneteenth? All right, so yes, this is a good question. Why would we celebrate this day? Let's keep going. It says, why do we celebrate? Well, people with a rich legacy, majestic kings and queens. All right, so the enslaved Africans, before the Africans were enslaved, they were kings and queens. And you see the beautiful attire, kind of dressed how I am today. And so sometimes we don't think about that there was a life before these Africans were brought to America. But there was. It says they were taken from their land and were no longer free. Now, if I have any children there, can we tell what this is? This is actually the pyramid. All right, so this would be an example where some people would live, some of the enslaved Africans before they were enslaved, where they lived. And we have the Sphinx here. All right. Why, oh, why do we celebrate Juneteenth? These people endured the pain of bruised cruelty. Now, those are two big words for some people. With bruised, we know what it means when we get a bruise, right? We get hurt. Okay. So there was this pain, and we can see the pain from the whip here in this picture. So why would we want to celebrate that? All right, let's keep going. They were separated for their families. Why, oh, why do we celebrate Juneteenth? So we see here, this is actually called an auction block. And this is where slaves were sold off to different families. And sometimes mommies would be taken away from babies, or daddies would be taken from families, and they were sold like a product or like an animal on the auction block. So why would we celebrate? Let's keep going. Why, oh, why do we celebrate Juneteenth? Because shackles and chains couldn't enslave their ingenuity. All right, ingenuity is a really big word, right? Anybody know what it means? Okay, so ingenuity means the wisdom, the intelligence. So even though the Africans were brought here to be slaves, they had this ingenuity, this intelligence, and even chains couldn't hold it back. All right, so you might know who this is. This is a famous historian, African-American historian. This is actually, anybody know? It's Madam C.J. Walker, okay? The first Black millionaire. And this is someone who actually used peanuts for science, okay? Anybody know who this is? No? Okay. Well, in the back of my book, I actually, if you have your book, in the back of my book, I have the names of all of these individuals, and you can learn who they are. All right, because I wanted this to be a book where you would also learn about why we do celebrate. All right, so this is George Washington Carver, and in the back you can learn about how he used peanuts. It would be a great person to actually study and learn more about. There were musicians, authors, abolitionists, and blacksmiths. So this is that example of that ingenuity. Now, you might not know who this is. She is the mother of African-American journalism. All right. You can learn more about her in the back of the book. And this is another example of ingenuity here. Okay. This is a blacksmith. And we may not know about blacksmiths as much today, but they were very important during the time of slavery and post-slavery Reconstruction. But blacksmiths, they created gates and tools, and you had a lot of African-American blacksmiths. You have some very famous blacksmiths that you can learn about in Charleston, South Carolina as well. One of my favorite people in the book. They were cowboys. Why do we celebrate Juneteenth? Hands carved instruments and furniture from trees. So we see right here, this is an African-American cowboy, which some people don't think about, but there's a whole history behind that. And then we have instruments, all right? And so the enslaved Africans created instruments. And actually, I have an instrument that was taken from Africa. So the enslaved Africans took those same skills that they made instruments, and they brought those instruments here. So they made famous instruments such as the banjo, the drum, and we use those instruments today. Hands sewed garments and fashioned soap that kept so many warm and clean. Why do we celebrate Juneteenth? They were warriors of freedom. All right. So there were a lot of washerwomen during the time of slavery, and actually the enslaved Africans created soap as well. Okay, so we have the hairs, and you see that's a washboard, and washboards were actually also used as instruments. Now, I know all the young people out here know who this person is. Okay, I'm sure you know. Guesses? That's right, that is Harriet Tubman. All right, so she was actually a warrior of freedom. Sometimes people think about freedom being given to the enslaved Africans, but people fought for freedom. Like we're fighting today for some of those freedoms that we want. You have to keep fighting for freedom, keep fighting for right. Okay? They were architects of liberty who risked their lives to help their family, friends, and strangers to be free. Great Juneteenth. Now, this is also another famous abolitionist, but he's not as famous as others. All right. So when you get the book, you can learn who he is. But I also wanted to have some things in the book for you all so you can learn about some historians that you may not know about. All right, so that is why I placed a few people who don't get as much spotlight as some of the other African-American historians. Secret messages hidden in songs, quilts, and literacy. Freedom mapped out in the stars. Sprinkled in a dark aerial sea. Why do we celebrate Juneteenth? Now, one cool thing about this is we know that ingenuity that we were talking about before. The enslaved Africans would use those secrets in the stars to find their way to freedom. And what's the biggest star that helped them? Anybody know? That's right, the North Star. So they would look at that North Star and travel north, okay, to find a way to freedom. The other thing it says is it was in secrets were hidden in quilts. And I have almost a quilt that I made with my sign back here. And so the quilts had so many messages, right? Through the Underground Railroad, so you could find your way to the Underground Railroad. Why do we celebrate Juneteenth? 2 years after President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, in Galveston, Texas, on June 19th, Colonel Granger proclaimed the enslaved to be free. Why do we celebrate Juneteenth? All right, so on this page, we know who this is. This is President Lincoln. All right, so he signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. All right, and it did proclaim the enslaved to be free. However, not until 2.5 years later did the slaves in Galveston, Texas, find out that they were free. And this is Colonel Granger. He was the leader of the troops, and he realized that the enslaved Africans were still working in Texas. And so he wrote up a proclamation that was actually placed in the newspaper. And it did talk about slaves being free. Now, what that freedom meant, you know, it wasn't quite clear, but all the enslaved Africans knew is that they were free. And as you can see, on that first Juneteenth, the people yelled the Day of Jubilee. So they celebrated. As you can see, they sang, they danced, they played their instruments. And then a year later, they came back to the same place. A lot of them celebrated in the churches where they could worship freely. And they came back and they had barbecues and they kept celebrating. They kept celebrating that freedom. They shouted to the heavens, "We're free, we're free." Why do we celebrate Juneteenth? Why do we celebrate Juneteenth? It's not a day full of bad memories. All across the great USA, the home of the brave, the land of the free, we celebrate the ending of slavery, the beginning of freedom for all, America's rich legacy. This is why we celebrate Juneteenth. So as we can see, this is why we celebrate. This is the day when you had freedom really proclaimed for all. And people fought for the freedom. It didn't mean they were exactly free because we didn't know what that meant. But it did mean that they were proclaimed free. And so year after year, people still have to fight for freedom. So there were setbacks, right? So that's why we saw a period called the Reconstruction and Jim Crow laws that would really try to stop the celebration, right? But that's okay. People kept fighting and kept fighting. And through the civil rights era, people kept fighting. And through even now, people are still fighting for freedom, trying to fight for what's right so that we all can be free. And that is why we celebrate. That is why we have the cookouts. That is why we do all of that. So let's talk about some of the things that you all can do today to celebrate. So if you haven't, thank you for joining me. One of the things I said is you can listen to a storyteller like me, right? So people can share that history. You can perform skits about the first Juneteenth. Learn how to play instruments that African Americans created, such as the banjo, the fiddle, the guitar, the dulcimer, which is a form of the piano. Read slave narratives. Did you know that slaves actually wrote about their stories? So one famous slave narrative, is with Frederick Douglass, and it's a little bit easier to understand. These enslaved Africans who really actually received their freedom or bought their freedom started to write about their stories, and they became very popular in America. And so there are several slave narratives where you can read about that. Learn, lift every voice and sing. So did you know that there's an African American national anthem, and it's called Lift Every Voice and Sing? Now, if you know Beyonce took it and made her own. She made a remix to it. So some people have learned about that through Beyonce's rendition of Lift Every Voice and Sing. But you can learn that. You can create a family quilt. Okay. So when you start to look at the slave quilts, the quilts There were clues hidden in quilts, but you can create your family quilt. Go to an African American museum or a production. Mhm. Another one is you can try to wash clothes, but this time wash it by hand. Mhm. And if your parents get a washboard, you could try to practice with the washboard in a basin. That would be pretty interesting, right? And then, as always, you can read a book about Juneteenth, like this one. And so every year you could read this book, and this could be your way to remember Juneteenth. Read about other African American historians. So if you're interested in getting this book, it's at my website, carlolachelledawson.com. I also will be getting it on Amazon within the next few weeks because I've had so many requests for the book. And we are going to do craft time. So make sure if you haven't already, get your paper, pencil, and markers at this time so that we can get ready for craft time. All right. So this is going to be a very easy craft. Okay. So what we're going to do, I want to show you guys. I actually have the back here. I have the African American flag. It's actually called the Pan-African flag. It was created in America, but it's shared all across the globe. So we call it Pan-African because pan means all. Okay, so it is a flag that was created to represent all Africans who were sold off into different parts of the world. And so if you look back here, you'll see the green, and the green represents the land or the wealth that was created from Africans all across the world. Okay. If you look at the black represents the people. All right. So that represents the Africans who are all across the world, including, of course, America. And then the red represents the blood. So the blood that was shed in slavery or the struggle. All right. And so we're going to create, everybody's going to get a piece of paper, and we're going to create the Pan-African flag. Okay. So do we have either, and so that means, of course, you're going to need green, right? Black, and red to do it. Okay. All right. Now we were face to face. We would have done all kind of interaction. We would have stood up. We would have danced. So I actually go and do storytelling at schools, at libraries, at programs. I'm also a motivational speaker, and of course, I'm an author. So you can use that same email, carlolachelledawson.com, if anybody's interested in having me come. I'm just saying that while we're getting our papers together. To tell you a little bit more about me, I teach creative writing and journalism. I'm an author, as I said, and I have 2 books, Why We Celebrate, and I have another book called Daring Dave, and it's about an African-American potter, poet, who is from South Carolina. And his pottery is big. It's like gallon pottery. It's like gallons and gallons of a jug, but it's pottery. And so this actually tells you about who Dave the Potter is. It tells you about his pottery. His pottery is worth like $50,000, thousands of dollars. But the cool thing about Dave the Potter is that he used writing. So he wrote poetry, little short poems, like 2 sentences, and he used his pottery to write messages. And so his messages might be things, words about other people to help people get free, and also about what was going on with maybe his slave master, things like that. So he's very interesting because he protested through his writing and his artwork. And so when we look at, all right, let's try to tell my daughter to stop hitting the table. So when we talk about protest is not always signs. Protest might be going into the streets and holding a sign, but protest can be writing. Protesting can come in the form of artwork. There's beautiful artwork in downtown Charlotte that we see right now. That's a form of protest. And for me, my protest comes in the form of writing. And so I also use protest in the form of my storytelling and when I do motivational speaking at high schools and at different programs. And also I'm a diversity coordinator. So I've been working with youth, helping them with diversity curriculum, diversity curriculum, and I'll be sharing that soon and have that book out soon. So helping others and helping the young people learn about themselves and knowing that we're all beautiful and we all have individual beauty and strength. So those are things that I do. Yeah. So let's keep going. So I wanted to show you, and I'm going to have my daughter. She doesn't want to be seen, I don't think. Would you come up here and tell them, when you make your flag, you're going to get, you can use a ruler if you want, or you can actually use you can use whatever. You can color in just like the flag back here, or you can do what she did. So I'm going to come on up, have my daughter come on up, excuse me, and I'm going to have her take over and talk about what this is. So come on and have a seat. Everybody can see you. All right. So we have the green first. And so what's the green?
So the green is for like the money and the land.
And yes. And so what did you draw inside your green?
In the green, I drew some like money and like grass, but I changed the color of the grass to match with it. And yeah.
And in the black, what did you draw?
I drew people.
All right. And so these are the people. Okay. And what did you do anything? Are they specific people or Black people?
It's just a bunch of
an
people.
Artistic slant on the people. And then in the red, what do we have here?
In the red right here, red is for like hard work.
Okay.
So
you have the word hard work.
Yes.
Okay. Very good. And thank you, Kai. And so what have you learned about Juneteenth over these years? We've done Juneteenth, and I've been a whole bunch of places talking about Juneteenth. What have you learned about Juneteenth?
I learned that there's like many things that we don't get to learn about history during school. So you have to dig deeper yourself and try to figure out what happened in your history and in the past.
Mm-hmm. All right. And my daughter's an artist, so I wanted to have her show her artwork because she does a lot of art. Thank you very much, Kai.
Thank you.
All right. So what I would love for you guys to do is to create your pieces and then take pictures of them. You can post them in the comments below. So please do that. But also I have a Facebook page, and it was supposed to be up as well. It was acting kind of weird, but it's on Facebook, and it's called @Carlo Lachelle Dawson. And so it's my Carlo Lachelle artist page. Excuse me. It says Carlo Lachelle artist, author, dramatist, and motivational speaker. So I would love for you to join me there. And post your pictures. Follow me and like and share this as well. I wanted to tell you about a few more events that I'll be at where your family can join. One cool thing is I will actually be a part of a documentary with the BBC. So the BBC is the British Broadcast Corporation, and it's their public channel. So I will be on a documentary with them, and it will be airing today. I'll post the link. I'm so excited about that. So it'll be international and just talking about what Juneteenth is. So I'm so excited about that. I also will be at a virtual event tonight, and it will be with Juneteenth Rock Hill. I used to be the president of Juneteenth Rock Hill, and that is actually how I had the opportunity to learn so much about Juneteenth and be a part of the board to really share. And I've been doing that for 5 years with them as the president. Not the president any longer, but I'm able to still lend my talents to them. And so I'll be a part of that virtual celebration tonight at 7 o'clock. I'll be performing as Sojourner Truth, Ain't I a Woman? And so I embody different characters. So I'll be Sojourner Truth tonight. So that's one part of Juneteenth, learning about different historians. But they'll have singers, poets, dancers, everything you can think of, storytellers. And that'll be a part of that event tonight. So all you have to do is go to JuneteenthRockHill.com. And also just go to, they have a Facebook page, Juneteenth Rock Hill. And then I'll also be a part of another virtual event tonight, and that's the Juneteenth Chester event. It's their very first event. I will be sharing my book there tonight. They'll have such folks as Debbie Allen, her mother is from Chester, and some other individuals. They'll be singing, dancing, having a youth time too. So tonight is at 7. It's going to kick off. And then tomorrow there will be a youth day, and that will be at 1 o'clock. And that's where I'll be sharing my book there. And there'll be other things for the youth tomorrow at 1 o'clock. And that's on the Juneteenth Chester Facebook page. So make sure you follow all of that. The last thing I want to say is if you want to buy the book, go to carlolachelledawson.com. And remember, post pictures, like, share. Go to my Facebook page. I am on Twitter. I am on Instagram at Carlo Lachelle Dawson. I know that's kind of hard, so let me tell you how I spell. CarlolChelledawson. All right. So I wanted to thank you all again for joining in with me during this story time. I can't wait to see your pictures. I do travel. I do come. I get to hang out with children. I do African American folklore with. I teach, do storytelling with African American folklore. I embody characters. I do motivational speaking with young people and people of any age. I do motivational speaking, and I also hold camps. So I'm going to be holding a camp for children, and I'm going to be talking about creative writing for protest. All right. So how can we use our writing for protest? So I'll share that as well in the description, and then I also will be sharing some other things as well. All right. Well, thank you all. I'll make sure to turn the comments on for you on YouTube so you can do that. And I'm trying to think if there's anything I'm forgetting. Oh, I also hold creative writing workshops for adults as well. So thank you again and have a great day.